Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man Squad channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'm kicking off my new Midnight Terrors marathon for you guys. And the first video I'm reacting to is 7 Most Disturbing True Scary Stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road and in the bag. Okay, here we go.
This happened back in 2015.
Okay.
And even though it's been years, I still think about it sometimes. I was about 21, freshly out of a bad relationship, and didn't know many people in my new city except for my ex and his friends. Not the best headspace, I'll admit, but I was lonely and just looking for some casual connections. Maybe a friend with benefits situation, or just someone to hang out with. I was using a dating app when I matched with a guy named Simon, who was 25, or so he claimed. He said he was in a band and lived in a house with his bandmates. We chatted off and on for a few days, nothing serious, but he sent me a YouTube link to their music. It was one of those videos with a single still image of a group of guys playing instruments. The music wasn't really my thing, but whatever. He seemed like an okay guy. Then, out of nowhere, he stopped replying, so I just figured that was that and moved on.
He probably just said that he was in a band, but they were just probably friends jamming out together, not got a record label. But if he stopped replying, that's weird. But don't you worry, he'll probably start back up.
A few days later, he messaged me again, apologizing for being busy and inviting me to a barbecue at his place with his bandmates and friends. He mentioned that their band manager provided the house for them to live in, which sounded a little suspect, considering their YouTube video had barely any views. But I shrugged it off, assuming he was just exaggerating. Maybe the house was a favor from a bar owner in exchange for regular gigs or something. Normally, I wouldn't have gone to some random dude's house alone, but I was bored, craving social interaction, and he made it sound like a big casual get-together. Plus, the area he mentioned was a pretty normal suburban neighborhood. To play it safe, I told him I wasn't comfortable going inside, but I'd stop by for a little while if I could stay outside. He was totally cool with that, which put me at ease. When I got off work, I texted him that I was on my way and asked him to meet me at the train station since I wasn't sure exactly where his house was. He agreed, but when I arrived, he was nowhere to be found. He told me to just start walking toward his neighborhood, and halfway through the parking lot, I finally spotted him. He was wearing the same distinct clothes from his photos, but his face, it looked different. Way older than the 25-year-old he claimed to be. Maybe it was a really outdated picture. Maybe he edited them heavily. Who knows?
Thinking in the beginning he probably stood her up, but no, he's one of them creepy stalker dudes that edited his photo to make him look younger. If this girl got any sense, she needs to stop walking near him and run back to her car and get out.
Red flag number 1. But I was still in my benefit of the doubt phase, so I brushed it off. Then I realized he was already drunk. Middle of the day, barely 5:30 p.m., and this guy was wasted. Again, a red flag, but I had been around enough heavy drinkers to not immediately see it as a danger sign. He led me to his house, and as we got to the door, I reminded him that I didn't want to go inside. He waved it off, saying we just had to walk through to get to the backyard. Fine, whatever. I didn't see another way around, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. The second we stepped inside, he locked the door behind me. I tried to tell myself it was just a habit. Some people automatically lock their doors when they come in.
No, I don't think that's the case. He's locking the door just so you wouldn't have a chance to turn around and go back out quick.
But something about it made my stomach drop. He then insisted on giving me a tour of the house. At this point, I was getting seriously uncomfortable. Where was the barbecue? Where were the people? The house didn't even look like it belonged to a bunch of musicians. It was decorated like a middle-aged woman's home. I started realizing that I had no idea whose house this really was. When we got to the kitchen, I glanced out the window toward the backyard, and my stomach sank. There was no barbecue, no people, no sign that anyone had been preparing for a party at all. That's when I confronted him, asking where everyone was, and he fed me some nonsense about his bandmates being on tour but running late. When I asked why he wasn't with them if he was in the band, his answer was so incoherent I don't even remember it. Now, I knew for sure something was seriously wrong. I started looking for a way to leave, but he kept pushing for me to just relax and hang out until they got back. Then, he tried to lead me into the basement. I took one look down the dark staircase and refused. He got pushy about it, saying he wanted to show me their soundproof music studio.
No, don't do it. It's a trap. He's probably trying to get you downstairs and lock you down in the basement.
That's when I noticed a heavy-duty door at the bottom, one of those thick, insulated ones that only open from the outside. My fight or flight kicked in hard. There was no way I was stepping foot in that basement. I made up some excuse about being scared of spiders, but he was getting more agitated. I knew I had to act natural, so I pretended to go along with his conversation, just waiting for the right moment to get out. I tried multiple times to suggest going outside, but he shut it down every time. Finally, I got an idea. I noticed he was out of beer and casually suggested we go get more for the party. Miraculously, he took the bait. As we walked to the liquor store, I was still freaking out internally, trying to figure out my escape. When we got there, I told him I didn't need to go inside and would just wait outside. He insisted I go in with him. My heart sank. I had been hoping to ditch him in the parking lot. Then, I saw my chance. Across the street was a drugstore, and I told him I needed to grab something real quick. He tried to follow me, but I made up some nonsense about how you can't bring alcohol inside. Shockingly, he believed me and agreed to wait outside. Inside, I wandered the aisles, hoping he'd get impatient and leave. But every time I glanced toward the door, he was still there, just standing, staring. No phone, no distractions, just watching for me. I felt trapped all over again. Finally, I hovered near the registers until I saw a big group of people checking out. I followed them outside, immediately turned to Simon, and in a loud, firm voice, told him to leave me alone. The group paused, watching us. He hesitated, looked at them, and then, just like that, he turned around and walked away. No yelling, no scene, just gone. I ran to the train station and never saw him again. His profile was deleted by the time I got home. Looking back, I wish I had reported him. I have no idea if he ever tried this again with someone else, but the thought haunts me. All I had was a likely fake name and a rough idea of where the house was, so maybe nothing would have come of it anyway. Either way, I learned a terrifying lesson that day, one I'll never forget.
Well, you did the right thing and acted like you needed to go into the pharmacy to get something. But man, she should have reported him right then. Then the cops would have asked him. But yeah, if you see a guy that's standing in a spot waiting for you and you thought it was supposed to be a younger guy, don't go to him. All right, let's get to story number 2.
A couple of weeks ago, I booked a cheap Airbnb in another country because I was traveling for a concert. I knew it wasn't going to be anything fancy, but since it was just for one night, I figured it didn't really matter as long as I had a place to sleep. From the start, things weren't going great. My data roaming didn't work at all, so I had to stop at a cafe, use their Wi-Fi, and try to memorize my route. Eventually, I made it to the house on time, rang the doorbell, and waited. No one answered. I rang again and waited a few more minutes. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the mail slot in the door and, out of curiosity, decided to peek inside. What I saw immediately put me on edge. The entrance looked completely abandoned. There was an old, dusty couch shoved right in front of the door, furniture covered in cloth, and everything looked neglected, like no one had lived there for years.
That's very strange. You book an Airbnb and you would think that the whole house would be clean and the furniture would be put in its place, not all dusty or covered, and there wouldn't be no mail in that slot. I'd be trying to check the Airbnb website just to see if there's another one around.
I usually love old houses, but this wasn't just old, it was completely uninviting. As I was standing there, trying to figure out what to do, an older man walked up from the street. He looked completely unwashed, with messy hair and clothes that seemed like they hadn't been cleaned in days. I asked him if he knew where the Airbnb was, and he mumbled something that sounded like a yes. When I asked if he was Tim, the name of my host, he just nodded, unlocked the door, and motioned for me to follow him inside. The inside was exactly what I had seen through the mail slot: dusty, cluttered, and in complete disarray. The most noticeable thing was the massive, creaky wooden staircase leading up to the next floor. The man led me upstairs, wheezing and coughing the whole way, smelling strongly of cigarettes. The second floor was even worse. It was completely dark. The furniture was randomly thrown together, covered in sheets, and the walls were lined with eerie old paintings and religious crosses. There was also a long, heavy curtain covering something in the corner of the hallway, and I really didn't want to know what was behind it. We went up another flight of stairs to what was supposed to be my floor, and it was the worst part of the house yet. The walls had cracks running through them, the lighting was dim, and it genuinely looked like something out of a horror movie.
Man, I know the host of this Airbnb is an older gentleman, but he should have had somebody come in there and clean it and restore the place for him, since he described seeing cracks in the wall. I mean, nobody's going to stay in a hotel or a house that looks like that. I don't know what this guy was thinking when he put it on Airbnb.
He showed me the bathroom, which had a huge hole in the wall and broken tiles in the bathtub. Everything looked like it hadn't been cleaned in forever. Finally, he led me to my room, which, compared to the rest of the house, was actually decent. The bed seemed fine, but the shelves were filled with creepy porcelain dolls, which immediately put me on edge. I asked if there was Wi-Fi, and he just shook his head. That meant I had no way to contact anyone while I was in the house. I also asked about the checkout time, and he just shrugged and said, "It doesn't matter." That was not reassuring. After that, he made his way up another set of stairs to the fourth floor, which was in complete darkness. He disappeared into the shadows without another word, leaving me standing there with an overwhelming sense of unease. I had already decided I wasn't going to shower there, so I just changed quickly and plugged in my phone to charge. That's when I noticed something even worse. There were no locks. Not on my bedroom door. Not on the bathroom. Not on the front door. Nothing. At that point, my brain started racing with all kinds of worst-case scenarios. On top of that, I noticed that the bathroom was full of half-used personal items. Old toothbrushes, shower gels, even a random eyelash curler. It didn't look like something the host had left out for guests to use. It just looked like someone had left in a hurry, and nobody ever bothered to clean up. That was enough for me. There was no way I was staying the night in that house. I grabbed my essentials, slipped a folded piece of paper under my door so I'd know if someone tried to open it while I was gone, and left for the concert. As I was walking down the staircase, I heard keys turning in the front door. I figured it was the host's wife or another guest. Instead, a middle-aged man walked in, looked at me, and said, "Hey, I'm Tim." I felt my stomach drop. If he was Tim, then who the hell was the old man? I could feel my pulse in my ears, but I somehow kept my composure. I made small talk for a minute, then got out of there as quickly as I could. Luckily, the concert was amazing, and I tried my best to shake off the weird experience. But by the time it was over, I was exhausted and knew I couldn't just stay out all night. I booked a last-minute bed in a nearby hostel. It wasn't the cleanest place in the world, but at least it had Wi-Fi, a proper shower, and, most importantly, a locked door. The next morning, I had to go back to the Airbnb to grab the rest of my stuff, and for some reason, before going in, I checked the mail slot again. I jumped back. The old man was sleeping right there, snoring on the couch in front of the entrance door. At that point, I just wanted to get my things and leave. I tiptoed inside, grabbed my bag, thankfully my room hadn't been touched, and got out of there as fast as I could. Maybe I overreacted, but between the two Tims, the missing locks, and the general creepiness of that house, it felt like I had narrowly avoided a really bad situation. I don't know what was actually going on there, and honestly, I don't want to know. One thing's for sure, I'm never booking the cheapest Airbnb again.
Well, I'm glad you got out of there safe and sound. But it's kind of strange that there was two guys named Tim, and the more middle-aged guy was the actual Airbnb host. So who in the world is the other guy? Makes you wonder, is that his dad? He should have asked him. And all this time I was thinking that he was the host. No, if he sounded grumpy like that, I don't think he was no host. I thought he was either a ghost or some other vagrant.
A few years ago, I was living in a pretty quiet neighborhood where I felt safe enough to go for late-night walks. It wasn't something I did all the time, but on this particular night, around 3:30 a.m., I was restless and needed to clear my head. I walked a couple of blocks to a small park near my house, a spot I had passed by dozens of times before without a second thought. It had a few walking paths, some large bushes lining the edges, and a street running alongside it. Across from the park, there was an open field. Nothing too unusual, but that night, it felt different. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. A bald man was moving back and forth between the park and the field, carrying large black plastic-wrapped objects. He was wearing blue surgical gloves and a long plastic coat, the kind you'd expect to see in a crime scene cleanup.
Okay, if I saw somebody like that, I'm not moving an inch. I'm going to hide somewhere and try to take some pictures quietly and then call the police, because that sounds like that guy was trying to clean up murder evidence. Because why else would he be wearing blue surgical gloves while throwing out black trash bags? But I don't know. I don't want to jump into any conclusions, so let's continue on with the story.
I slowed down, watching him carefully, and that's when he noticed me. Without hesitation, he ran toward the bushes and hid inside them, shoving the bags in with him. I could still see his head peeking through the leaves, watching me. At that moment, every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave. I turned around and started walking home as calmly as I could. But when I glanced back, my stomach dropped. He was peering over the bushes, his pale, bald head standing out even in the dim light. I quickened my pace. I wasn't about to run. I didn't want him to know I was scared, but my heart was pounding. A block later, I checked again. He was no longer behind the bushes. Instead, he had sprinted across the street and was now hiding behind a large tree, barely concealed. And once again, all I could see was his bald head sticking out, staring at me. At that point, I knew for sure he was following me. I kept moving, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to give him a reason to chase me, but I wasn't about to slow down either. My house wasn't far, and as soon as I reached it, I rushed inside, locking both the front and back doors behind me. I checked the windows, listened for any sounds outside, but after a few minutes, everything was silent. Eventually, I convinced myself that maybe he had just wanted to scare me and had left. The next morning, curiosity got the best of me. In broad daylight, with people around, I walked back to the park to check the bushes. But whatever he had hidden there was gone. There was no sign that anything had ever been there in the first place. That alone sent a chill down my spine. That night, I decided to stay in, trying to push the whole thing out of my mind. I put on a movie, made some popcorn, and told myself I was being paranoid. But at some point, I got up to grab a glass of water. My kitchen window faced the backyard, and since I always kept the kitchen lights off at night, I could see outside clearly without anyone seeing in. When I looked out, I froze. Standing dead center in my backyard, staring directly at my house, was the bald man. Even in the darkness, I could tell it was him. That same pale head. He wasn't moving, wasn't making a sound, just standing there, watching. I didn't think. I acted. I cracked open the window and yelled, "Hey!" as loud as I could. The second my voice cut through the silence, he bolted. He ran so fast that the gate to my fence swung open behind him, left wide open in his escape. That was the last time I ever saw him. I never found out what he was doing that night, what was in those bags, or why he followed me home. And honestly, I don't think I want to know.
I bet you it was probably dismembered body parts. You never know. Because why else would he try to hide them in a bush real quick and then jump in there himself? He was trying to get rid of them, and then you stumbled upon what he was doing, and he was trying to hide everything. But then when you started walking away, he wanted to follow you to see where you lived at. And he was probably planning on breaking into the house to get you. I don't know. That is scary. Thank God he came to his senses and yelled out, "Hey!" But like I said earlier, if you see somebody doing some criminal activity, it's best to hide and try to take evidence by taking photos without the flash on and call the cops quietly to let them know what's going on, and then they can get there quicker to stop them from carrying out their plans. But yeah, that'll be a scary sight to see for sure.
When I was 12 years old, I attended a private school in Zagreb, Croatia, which meant I had a pretty long commute home. My usual routine was taking the bus from school to the main street, hopping on a tram, and then walking through a public park to reach my apartment. It was something I did almost every day, so I never thought twice about it. That changed one night when I made the mistake of sitting in front of the wrong person. That particular week, I had afternoon classes, meaning I left school later in the evening. As usual, a few classmates and I boarded the bus together, spreading out across the seats. I ended up sitting in front of a middle-aged man with balding hair, slightly dirty clothes, and an overall grimy appearance. The second I sat down, he started staring at me. Not a glance, not a quick look, full-on, unwavering eye contact with a cold, unreadable expression. It was unnerving, but I tried to ignore it. I pulled out a book and pretended to read, but I could feel his gaze on me the entire ride.
Not to be mean, but I would rather sit in the back of. But yeah, that thought of having somebody look at you makes my hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I know where this is getting at. He's probably going to get off the bus and follow him. But I don't want to jump ahead, so let's continue.
My phone was dead, so I couldn't text anyone, and for some reason, I felt too scared to move. Maybe I thought acknowledging him would make it worse, or maybe I was just frozen in place. When the bus finally arrived at our stop, I was relieved to get off. Some of my classmates walked home, while the rest of us headed to the tram station. That's when I realized the man had followed us. He wasn't right behind us, but he was keeping his distance, walking in the same direction. I whispered to my friend about it, telling him not to look back. I figured if we ignored him, he'd leave us alone. But when our tram arrived, he got on too. At this point, I was really creeped out, but I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. After all, people take the same routes all the time, right? But then, as my stop got closer, I started quietly asking my friend if he should get off with me, just in case. Before we could decide, the man suddenly stood up and got off at my stop first, heading into the park, the exact opposite direction of where I needed to go. That should have reassured me, but something felt off, almost like he overheard us talking and was trying to throw us off. But since I didn't have any solid reason to suspect him, I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. The tram left, and I started walking home alone. It was only a 5-minute walk, but as soon as I turned onto my street, my heart sank. Footsteps behind me. I glanced back, and there he was. He had doubled back and was following me. I picked up my pace, practically speed walking toward my building. The closer I got, the faster he moved. By the time I reached my apartment complex and buzzed the intercom for my mom to let me in, he was right behind me. I could smell him. Unwashed, sweaty, disgusting. And then he spoke. "Hey, how have you been, buddy? I saw your dad yesterday and he told me all about how you're getting on in that new school of yours." That's when I knew. He was lying. My dad had been out of town for months on business. There was no way he had talked to him. I didn't respond. I just stared at him, my heart racing. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but I was frozen in place. Then, finally, the door buzzed open and I bolted inside. I didn't even think. I just ran up the stairs as fast as I could, my heavy backpack weighing me down. But when I glanced back, my stomach dropped. He was following me. He was running up the stairs after me. I have never felt such a pure rush of adrenaline in my life. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I didn't stop until I reached my floor. My mom was standing in the doorway smiling, until I shoved past her and slammed the door shut behind me. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, I heard footsteps slow down, and then disappear. He was gone. The police arrived later that night, took my statement, and checked the security footage. But because it was too dark and I hadn't turned on the building lights, they couldn't get a clear shot of his face. For the next 2 weeks, I was too scared to walk home alone, so my mom picked me up every evening. Then, one day, I saw his face again, on the news. A man had been arrested for attempted kidnapping and sexual assault of children. And when they showed his mugshot, my blood ran cold. It was him. Even though he was finally caught, that experience changed me forever. I realized how lucky I was that night, because if my mom hadn't answered the intercom in time, or if he had gotten to me first, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Please, always trust your instincts. Always stay aware of your surroundings, and never ever assume that bad things can't happen to you.
He's got a point, because you never know who to trust nowadays, because they may seem like they're nice, down to earth people, but then they turn out to be sexual predators. So let's put it that way. Oh man, thank God his mom answered the buzzer, but thank God he got into that apartment of his and closed the door fast before that guy had a chance to grab him. That is just downright disturbing.
I live alone in a quiet little college town, though I'm not a student or professor. My apartment is in a duplex, just a few blocks from campus, and when the students leave for winter break, the whole area feels almost deserted. It's usually peaceful, but one particular winter night, I woke up to something weird. At first, I couldn't quite tell what I was hearing. It wasn't crying in the traditional sense, more like a weird ghostly wailing, almost like someone was pretending to be a ghost, except they were too good at it. There were no shouts for help, no sounds of distress, just that strange, eerie moaning drifting through the street. I wasn't about to walk outside and investigate, but I did peek out my window. Nothing. The sound slowly faded, and eventually, I convinced myself it was probably just some drunk student messing around. I went back to bed, a little uneasy, but not exactly scared. Then came Thursday night. I was already on edge, half expecting to hear that weird wailing again. But instead, I woke up to something completely different. At first, I thought maybe it had snowed overnight, because I heard the distinct sound of a shovel scraping pavement. But when I looked outside, there was no snow, just thick fog. And that's when I saw her. She was standing across the street, partially obscured by the mist. At first, I thought she was wearing some kind of strange hat, but then I realized that was her hair. It was long, matted, and tangled into a single massive, glistening knot that looked oily and heavy, hanging down to her waist. She was standing oddly, too, shoulders hunched forward, arms crossed behind her back, like a figure skater preparing for a routine. And then she started moving. 2 heavy stomps, followed by an effortless glide across the pavement. Thud, thud, scrape, thud, thud, scrape. It was hypnotic. She shouldn't have been able to move like that. There was no ice, but she glided smoothly, like she was skating on an invisible surface.
Okay, that sounds like she's a mentally disturbed person that's trying to intimidate him. You should not keep looking at her and just go before she starts to lunge at you.
Despite her frail, elderly appearance, she was strangely graceful, spinning and twirling like she was performing a routine she had done 1,000 times before. She kept repeating the same 3-step motion over and over. Stomp, stomp, glide, stomp, stomp, glide. First in one direction, then turning to do the same thing the other way. Then, suddenly, she stopped. She crouched low to the ground, like a sprinter at the starting line, fingertips barely touching the pavement. And she just stayed there, perfectly still, for at least a full minute. I didn't move. I barely breathed. Then, in one fluid motion, she rose up, turned away from me, and lifted herself onto her tiptoes, arms outstretched like she was preparing for a grand finale. And without warning, she broke into that fast tiptoe ballet movement that professional dancers do, scampering away into the fog. She didn't make a sound. I haven't seen her since. Haven't heard the wailing either. But every time I walk down that street at night, I find myself listening, just in case.
Well, maybe she moved on to another street, or somebody called about her and got her picked up and taken to a hospital. You never know. But that is kind of strange seeing a woman in the mist with long, oily hair, and she's just acting like she's a figure skater. Right there, that tells you that she was losing it. But thank God she did not attack him, because I know he'll have nightmares about that forever. But that would be a strange sight to see in the winter.
All right, so out of respect for privacy, I'm going to change some names here. The important people: me, my cousin Drew, and a few neighborhood kids: Josh, Kylie, and Evan. And of course, Gabe. This all happened when my parents were going through a messy divorce. My mom had to move out of our old neighborhood pretty fast, and since her new place wasn't in the school district, things got a little complicated. The plan was that Drew and I would stay at my dad's house for a few hours after school until my mom got off work. We still had all our old neighborhood friends, and despite everything going on, life felt kind of normal, at least for a while. Then Gabe moved in. At first, he was just the new kid on the block. Tall, skinny, brown hair. Nothing about him screamed trouble. He actually fit in pretty well with us. We learned that he used to go to our school but had been expelled for throwing a desk at a teacher. Yeah, should have been a huge red flag, right?
Yeah, that would be a red flag for me. If he's known for throwing desks at teachers or causing trouble at the school in general, I'd be scared to have him in my neighborhood.
But we were kids. We shrugged it off. Drew and I got close to him, maybe even closer than the others. So when he chased Josh home with a machete, laughing like it was some kind of game, we didn't immediately cut ties with him. Cops were called. He disappeared from school for a few days. And when he came back, he acted like nothing happened. That was just the beginning. One day on the bus, we were talking like usual when, out of nowhere, he stabbed me in the neck with a pencil. It barely broke the skin, but still, it was my freaking neck. He laughed it off like it was a joke. I moved seats and told the bus driver, which got him kicked off the bus for a few days. When he came back, he had to sit at the front. He knew I was the one who told on him, and from that moment on, he hated me.
Yeah, him chasing that boy with a machete in the neighborhood and then getting stabbed in the neck with a pencil, he keeps on laughing about it. He's psychotic. His parents should have took him to a mental institution. But also, yeah, I can see him gonna get mad now because he told on him. Oh boy. This other boy needs to watch out and make sure he doesn't try to murder him.
A week later, most of the neighborhood kids had finally cut him off. But I was stupid. When he messaged me, apologizing and inviting Drew and me to hang out, I actually agreed. He mentioned that some other kids would be at the Vine, a spot deep in the woods where we used to build forts. So I figured, why not? Biggest mistake of my life. When we got to his house, he opened the door holding a kitchen knife. That should have been my cue to run, but for some reason, I stayed. With this weird grin, he dragged the knife across his own arm, cutting himself like it was no big deal. Then he laughed, and instead of getting the hell out of there, we followed him into the woods. When we got to the Vine, something felt off. No one else was there. I remember looking at Gabe, and he just smirked. "They must be late," he said. "Let's just get started." Drew and I were on edge. He told me to go grab some sticks by the pond, so I turned and started walking.
Oh, heck no. It's a trap. That guy not only don't care if he cuts himself and harms others, but he's literally planning on probably murdering them in the area that hardly ain't nobody's there. Oh man, when them boys acted like they were going to go get sticks, they need to run back now and call the cops on him. Man, my blood pressure would be spiking at this moment.
About 10 seconds in, I got this weird gut feeling, like something was watching me. I turned around, and there was Gabe, creeping up behind Drew, raising a sharp garden tool above his head. I didn't think. I just yelled his name. He instantly dropped the tool, acting like nothing happened. But I knew what I saw. My heart was pounding as I lied and said my mom just texted. Time to go. Funny thing was, my phone didn't even have data. Gabe just stared at me, and in that moment, I knew he knew that I had caught him. Then, he chased us. We bolted through the woods, barely making it up the steep hill before he could grab us. When we finally got out, we ran home without looking back. The next day, we told the other kids what happened. And then, Gabe disappeared. Not just from the neighborhood, but from everywhere. He wasn't at school. His parents moved away almost immediately. Years later, I tried looking him up online. No Facebook, no Instagram, no records of him at all. It was like he never even existed. But I know he did. And I thank God every day that I turned around when I did.
Yeah, thank God. Because if you guys stayed there with him a little bit longer, you never know, he probably would have attacked you guys with the garden tool and killed you. But I bet you that Gabe caused a lot of problems for his parents. That's why they moved. I hope they took him to a mental institution to get him checked out, because if he don't have no Facebook, Instagram, or any other social media account, that proves it right there. I hope he is getting treated, but man, that's disturbing. I'd be scared to have somebody around my neighborhood if they acted like that.
My family has homes in both Mexico and Texas, so I'm constantly bouncing back and forth between the two. On a normal week, I cross the border into Texas for school in the morning, then head back to Mexico in the evening. Living in Mexico, I've gotten used to cartel activity. It's just part of life. If there's a shooting nearby, plans get canceled, and we move on. It doesn't really faze me anymore, but nothing really prepares you for an up-close encounter. Back when we were dating, my ex-girlfriend lived in a gated neighborhood on the wealthier side of the city. I used to go over all the time, and one night, when her parents were gone, she invited me to hang out. We got pretty wasted, and around 2 a.m., we decided to take a walk so we could smoke some weed. Texas weed, by the way. We ended up at a basketball court behind this insanely nice house with expensive cars parked outside. I made some offhand comment like, damn, what do they do for a living? And she casually replied, Mana. If you don't know, that's slang for cartel. I laughed, thinking she was joking, until she told me how the Mexican army locked down their entire neighborhood back in 2014 because of them.
Well, thank God I'm not living in that area. The military locking down the town. Because it seems like where they're living at is strict. Sad they got to go through that all the time.
My smile disappeared so fast. That's when it hit me. We were standing behind a cartel safe house at 2 a.m., smoking foreign weed. I got pissed and told her we needed to leave now, but she brushed it off. Relax, she said. It's just some rich kids hooking up. At first, I wanted to believe her, but something felt wrong. The truck just sat there for a solid 5 minutes, engine running, no one getting out. I kept pushing her to leave, and as soon as we got up, the truck suddenly took off. For a second, I thought we were in the clear. We started walking to the next street, and just as I was about to breathe again, my stomach dropped. The truck cut us off at the corner. That's when my ex panicked and bolted into an unfinished house under construction. She tried to pull me with her, but I didn't move. See, my dad's a cop, and something he's drilled into my head is never run unless you have a reason to. She had the weed. I didn't. So I just stood my ground. The driver's side window rolled down. A guy inside gestured for me to come closer. I didn't have much of a choice, so I walked up to the truck, trying not to let my face show how badly I was freaking out. First thing I noticed, both of them were armed. My stomach sank. The driver? Weirdly normal looking. Almost too normal. But the passenger? He looked like he was tripping balls. His pupils were huge, and he had this wild, twitchy expression like he was barely keeping it together. The guy had his hand wrapped around the grip of his rifle, staring at me like he was just waiting for a reason to use it. The driver asked, "What are you doing here?" I tried to play it cool. "Just smoking," I said. He narrowed his eyes. "Smoking what?" "Cigarettes," I lied. There was a long pause, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Finally, I spoke up again. "I don't know who you're looking for, but it's not us. I'm not even from here." His expression changed slightly. "You American?" I nodded. "Show me." Thank God I always carry my passport since I crossed the border so much. I pulled it out and handed it over. He flipped through it, then asked about my ex. "She's American too," I lied again. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "Go get her." That's when I took a huge gamble. I'd rather not. I knew that if they found weed on her, and it wasn't theirs, she was screwed. The guy stared at me for a second, then, thankfully, let it go. He handed back my passport, went through my phone, and finally said, "I better not see you out here this late again." Then they drove off. I turned around and saw my ex peeking from behind a pile of cement bags. I motioned for her to come out, and we ran back to her house as fast as we could. Once we got inside, I told her to give me the weed so I could get rid of it. That's when she hit me with, "Oh, I hid it under the floorboards at the construction site." We sprinted back to grab it because if those guys found it there, we were dead. That 2-minute run was the longest, most terrifying moment of my life. Even now, what keeps me up at night isn't the fact that we got caught. It's the way the passenger looked at me. The guy never spoke, never blinked, never took his hand off his gun. He was just staring me down, like he was waiting for me to slip up so he could end me right then and there. And I still don't know how I made it out of that alive.
Well, thank God those men did not shoot you guys for hanging around in one of their safe houses. But yeah, if they saw that weed, they probably would have shot him and took the weed and got out of there. But his ex-girlfriend was really stupid just to hide the weed underneath that construction house. I get it, she was scared and she thought that she was in trouble, she had to ditch it, but still, you should have just hold on to it to see what happens with what your boyfriend was telling, instead of having to run back from the safety of your house. But anyway, That's going to be it for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Terrors reactions like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I said it's a wrap, and that's it.